Okay, this is the Greeter programming live stream for May 6th, 2018. This is 12:45 p.m. Central Time. So I'm trying to figure out how this with login function is supposed to work. So the essential dilemma is that we need two essentially different scenarios for testing with a logged in user. One scenario is this test, which is inside the login code itself. And the other scenario is something like the member test, where really we just want to say, give me a login session, basically just, I want to do testing with the whole code base, but I don't want to bother with logging in and logging out. Just log me in, run all the tests that way. And so you know what? I'm going to change my mind again. I'm just going to go back to what I was originally going to do, which is this with login function is doing a login is not that difficult, and is, I mean, we've already got a test here. Yeah, putting this test here probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to revert the use of with login here. Just say $jar add request. Res equals set request rec. Okay, so this does basically what we want. We do a request for a URL without a cookie. We get a 403. We get a cookie. We do a request with the cookie. We get a 404. And so then okay, so now if I go in here and I run the test again, I get can't locate t test login.t. Hang on a sec. Let me run these tests just to be absolutely certain. So I'm basically going to this is a small enough amount of code that I can dissociate it. I've already got essentially the same logic here. Cut and paste it, and if I want to combine that, I can later on. Okay. This is not a perfect solution. If you're watching this to learn about programming, the most important thing you can learn about programming is that there are no perfect solutions. You have to use your judgment to pick the best solution. I do not advocate being happy about imperfect solutions, and I especially do not advocate owning an imperfect solution and becoming offended and angry when someone I don't advocate becoming offended and angry when someone points out that the imperfect solution you adopted is imperfect. So by all means, don't be happy about it. I'm not happy about it. But use your engineering judgment to decide where the boundary is between this is bad enough that it's worth spending more time on, and this is bad, this is crappy, but it's less crappy than spending hours, or an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it is, spinning your wheels trying to come up with a perfect solution. Because sometimes there just isn't a perfect solution. Okay. So moving on, going back to the member thing now. And I said that I was going to use moops, which gives me strict and warning by default. And you may know moops as you may know moops as an object-oriented syntax sugar, but it also has a procedural syntax sugar, which you can use here. And so what this is going to need is I don't actually know how to do this. So this is kind of imperfect, but we'll go ahead and use testdb. And then I'm going to move this code and just run it at compile time inside the test login. So use exporter import. Export the with login function. Cookies require you to use a host name, and nothing else in HTTP, as far as I'm aware, requires you to use a host name. So this with login isn't used anywhere. So we'll define it here. We want to use the moop syntax just to be consistent. So let me go ahead and look up what the move syntax for a function actually is. I think fun is the right keyword. Yes, fun is the right keyword. And all we've got is a callback. So go ahead, we're going to need to use plaque test. We could actually use these at the top level of our function if we wanted to. But we're not going to. So this class, I said I was going to move it out to this file, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. Give it a namespace inside t-test-login. You can't, being t-test-login doesn't mean I completely own that namespace, but at least means that anybody else that wants to create a package there should clear it with me. So it's fine to say test-login wrapsut like this. Anybody that creates a wrapsut file should be aware that they're doing something wrong, in my opinion. So, let's see, put the host up here. Create a user, create this with login function that logs in and returns this. And then what I want to do is have the wrapsut function set the URI attribute or a plain string. String is given, it should be parsable as an absolute URI. And string. Can be a URI object. What I want to do is okay, so let's do this, and then let me see. Go into the request here. We're already mutating the request, so we could build on that if we really wanted to. So we're now mutating the request twice. we're changing the host name, then adding cookies to it, and then doing a request with it. In general, changing your arguments is a really bad idea. But looking at it real quick, I'm not seeing a good way around it, and it's justifiable in this case because the rec argument to request is pretty much going to be thrown away as soon as we're done with it. So effectively, we could say that ownership of $rec is being passed into request here. Okay, so test login, each time you use it, it goes ahead, it uses testdb, which Perl will, is that true? No, that's not true. Perl will call import repeatedly. Okay, this is also a kind of a hack. And it's incorrect. Return is unstructured. I don't think you need the parentheses there. So what I'm trying to do here is only drop and create the unit test database once per process. So I go ahead and create a test database imported variable, refer to it. I'm just auto-vivifying it here. This is the only place I'm using it, which is why I don't feel the need to pre-declare it. Create it, make it package level. I could also say state if I wanted to. Increment it, plus it, and then post increment will return false the first time through the function and then true afterwards. And then I want to skip this process, this whole process, to drop and recreate the database and do the configure, and only do it the first time testdb is imported. Test login, on the other hand, this code, because it's not inside the import function, will actually run. It'll actually run once, and then the second time you say use test login in the same function, Perl will say, oh, this code is already run, I don't need to run it again. So we set up our dev login, set up our dev user, set up our test database, set up our dev user, create a with login function. The interface to exporter is that your package that's exporting functions needs to have two global package level variables called @export and @export_ok. This is 23-ish year old, like Perl 5.0 style logic. It's related to how inheritance is implemented internally. And there just isn't a good syntax sugar around it. So let's just make sure that the login test should pass. I don't think I've broken anything. So verify that. Put that back. Am I not actually live streaming? Okay, it looks like the stream didn't actually end when I started. I can never tell when YouTube streams are actually going to wrap up or not. So it looks like the stream has been going continuously. This says elapsed time is 20 minutes, 2 minutes, 53 seconds. Oh, heck, I don't know. I'm going to be taking a break soon anyway. Okay, so the login test is passing now. Let's try running the member test and see what happens. So we create this with login function that does a login, grabs the cookies, and then passes you a wrapped SUT, which has the SUT, remembers the host name and the cookie jar, and then it takes your request, changes it to HTTPS, sets the host name, extracts the cookies, which should probably work. So there's just a few more syntax sugar bits that I need to import. HTTP request common, so I get the post function, magic function. Test login page 34. Right. So I need to change this to just use this dev login credentials. So hopefully, again, if you're using this to try to learn how to program, another thing you're picking up on is that you can absolutely be successful as a programmer. You can be very successful as a programmer and really make a lot of very silly mistakes. It is more important to be able to recognize silly mistakes and fix them than it is to be able to get everything right the first time. And that is something, that's one thing that I am super hyped about this. As you can tell, I'm basically just cutting and pasting imports between the files, finding all the things I forgot to import and copying the imports. So decode JSON isn't actually used. So we go ahead and get rid of that. That is one thing that most book authors will tell you, is that the examples in their books are really not a good example for you of what programming is supposed to look like when you're really good at it. But there's such a strong convention of writing books with just fully worked out, fully debugged examples, that it really just ends up being something that books are just not useful for, is telling you what does programming actually look like when you're doing it. Because it does not look like the examples in textbooks. However, okay, so we've got what we believe is, you know what, let me go ahead and confirm that. So my res is request gets my YouTube video is distracting me here. Here it is. PI member. Okay, and as we've seen, because we're requesting something in /API, we should get a 403 if we're not actually logged in. Or something worse. Global symbol $res. Okay, so the real problem is that we're not importing get, which is HTTP request common. So go up here, we'll add that. Okay, and we have a passing test. This test is going to stay in place, and the next step is going to be to add a failing. Well, there is one other thing we want to do, which is we should be returning JSON. We should be returning JSON, but that's not critical because the 404 basically tells the whole story. So let's see what we've got here. We've basically decided not to use, so in line with login in login test, because we basically decided not to use it there. So I actually prefer get add-e over get add-p or the darks behavior. Mostly I prefer darks, but I really wish it supported something like get add-e. It does on a per patch pan basis, but Vim is just a much better way of going through and looking at all the changes and finding the changes you actually want. However, I do want to split this up into 2 commits. So add test file for doing requests with login. Okay. So we will push that. And then the next step is we want to write a test for the code for what happens if we look up a member that is in the database. We want to write a couple of tests for that because we want to make sure that it doesn't matter how they format the phone number. They just put in a phone number, we find the digits and look up the user. But that will be next time. The other thing that I'm not doing, that I'm ignoring for right now, is testdb, test login. Right. Testdb and test login are code, and they should have tests, and we're ignoring that. Test login in particular, it would be nice it's kind of hard to really test login directly, at least without mocking. But it would be nice to take that last /API test and have a test file for the test login function. But we can worry. That's the thing that we can worry about later. But I just want to make the point that that file should have tests. Your tests should be very direct, straight line. Do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. If you need complicated logic like this login stuff, you should factor it out and then write a test that shows that the factored out logic is actually correct. So this has been the Greeter programming live stream for May 6, 2018. This is Jonathan Kest. I'm signing off.